For 20 years, I designed the company's most profitable products and secured their patents. When they declared me inefficient and fired me, they forgot to check that those patents were still registered in my name. When my lawyer called and said 60% of the company's annual revenue comes from your patents, I realized just how sweet my revenge would be. My name is Connor Walsh. I'm 52 years old, and I'm about to tell you how 2 decades of loyalty and innovation became the foundation for the most satisfying comeback of my career. It all began in 2004 when I joined Pinnacle Engineering Solutions as a senior mechanical engineer. Fresh out of graduate school with a master's degree in mechanical engineering from a prestigious university, I was eager to apply my knowledge to real-world problems. Pinnacle was a mid-sized company specializing in industrial automation equipment, and they promised me the opportunity to work on cutting-edge projects that would shape the future of manufacturing. My first assignment was redesigning their flagship conveyor system. The existing design was functional but inefficient, prone to breakdowns, and expensive to maintain. I spent 6 months analyzing every component, studying failure patterns, and developing solutions that would address the fundamental weaknesses in their approach. The breakthrough came when I realized that traditional conveyor systems were thinking about movement all wrong. Instead of pushing materials along a fixed path, what if we could create a dynamic system that adapted to different loads, speeds, and requirements in real time? I designed what I called the adaptive flow system. It used a network of smart sensors, variable speed motors, and predictive algorithms to optimize material movement automatically. The system could handle everything from lightweight electronics components to heavy industrial parts, adjusting its configuration on the fly to maximize efficiency. The results were extraordinary. Our new system reduced energy consumption by 45%, decreased maintenance requirements by 60%, and increased throughput by 30% compared to traditional alternatives. More importantly, it opened up entirely new possibilities for how manufacturers could design their production lines. Pinnacle's management was thrilled. Within 6 months, we had orders worth over $20 million. The adaptive flow system became our signature product, and I was promoted to principal engineer with a team of designers working under my direction. That's when I learned an important lesson about intellectual property protection. Our legal department recommended filing patents for the key innovations I developed. The sensor integration technology, the predictive algorithms, the variable speed control systems, and the overall system architecture. As the primary inventor, my name will be listed on all the patent applications. It's standard procedure, explained Patricia Kim, our lead patent attorney. The company will own the patents, but as the inventor, your name is permanently associated with the innovations. It's recognition for your contributions. I signed the paperwork without thinking much about the long-term implications. At the time, I was focused on developing the next generation of improvements to our system, not worrying about legal details. Over the following years, I continued to innovate and improve our product line. The adaptive flow system evolved into an entire family of related technologies. Smart sorting mechanisms that could identify and route different types of materials. Predictive maintenance systems that could forecast equipment failures before they happened. Integration platforms that allowed our equipment to communicate seamlessly with existing factory management systems. Each innovation led to new patent applications with my name as the primary inventor. Some patents covered fundamental algorithmic approaches. Others protected specific mechanical designs or sensor configurations. A few cover the software architectures that tied everything together. By 2010, Pinnacle had become the leading provider of intelligent automation equipment in North America. Our revenue had grown from $50 million to over $300 million annually. The company went public, and I was promoted to Chief Technology Officer, overseeing all product development and innovation activities. The success was intoxicating, but it also brought new challenges. As CTO, I found myself spending more time in meetings and less time on actual engineering work. Budget discussions, strategic planning sessions, investor presentations, regulatory compliance reviews. The administrative demands of corporate leadership began consuming most of my time. Meanwhile, Pinnacle continued to grow through acquisitions and market expansion. We purchased smaller competitors, integrated their technologies into our platform, and expanded into international markets. The company that had started as a focused engineering firm became a diversified industrial conglomerate with operations across 3 continents. New leadership brought different priorities. Gordon Hayes, who became CEO in 2015, came from a finance background rather than engineering. His focus was on maximizing shareholder value through operational efficiency and cost reduction. Innovation was still important, but only if it delivered immediate returns on investment. Connor, your technical contributions have been extraordinary, Gordon told me during my first performance review under his leadership. But at this stage of the company's development, we need to think more strategically about resource allocation and market positioning. Translation: they wanted me to focus less on breakthrough innovations and more on incremental improvements that could be commercialized quickly. The shift in priorities became more pronounced over the following years. New product development budgets were reduced in favor of marketing and sales initiatives. The research team I'd built was restructured to focus on short-term customer requests rather than long-term technological advancement. Patent applications slowed as the company prioritized speed to market over intellectual property protection. I adapted as best I could, but the change in culture was frustrating. Instead of pursuing revolutionary improvements, I found myself optimizing existing products for cost reduction and manufacturing efficiency. Important work, but not the kind of breakthrough thinking that had originally excited me about engineering. The final straw came in early 2023. Pinnacle hired a consulting firm called Strategic Dynamics to conduct a comprehensive review of our operations and recommend optimization strategies. Their report, delivered after 3 months of analysis, concluded that the company was carrying excess overhead in legacy technical positions. The recommendation was clear: eliminate expensive senior engineering roles that weren't directly tied to current revenue generation and replace them with younger, less expensive talent focused on implementation rather than innovation. I was 51 years old, with 20 years of experience and a track record of creating hundreds of millions of dollars in value for the company. According to Strategic Dynamics, I was excess overhead. Gordon called me into his office on a Thursday afternoon in March. Connor, we need to discuss your future with the company. The conversation that followed was corporate theater at its most insulting. Phrases like right-sizing our technical organization and aligning resources with strategic priorities and leveraging emerging talent pools. They were firing me, but they wanted to pretend it was a mutual decision based on evolving business needs. We're prepared to offer you a generous severance package, Gordon continued. 6 months' salary, extended health benefits, and assistance with outplacement services. We want to make this transition as smooth as possible. I listened to the entire presentation without saying much. The decision had clearly been made, and nothing I could say would change their minds. After 20 years of building their most successful products, I was being discarded like an outdated piece of equipment. I'll need some time to review the offer, I said finally. Of course. Take all the time you need. That evening, I called my brother Liam, who had been encouraging me for years to consider starting my own consulting firm. They actually fired you? He asked, incredulous. After everything you've built for that company? Apparently, I'm excess overhead now. Connor, this might be the best thing that ever happened to you. You've been talking for years about wanting to get back to real engineering work instead of corporate bureaucracy. He was right, but the sting of betrayal was still fresh. 20 years of loyalty, innovation, and dedication, dismissed with a standard severance package and corporate doublespeak about strategic realignment. I spent the weekend reviewing my career at Pinnacle, looking through old project files and patent applications. That's when I started to notice something interesting about the intellectual property documentation. Most of the patents I developed were assigned to Pinnacle Engineering Solutions, but the assignment agreements contained specific language about my employment status and role within the company. Language that I'd forgotten about over the years, but which now seemed potentially significant. On Monday morning, I called Patricia Kim, the patent attorney who had handled most of my early filings. Connor, I heard about your situation. I'm sorry they're making this change. Patricia, I have a question about the patent assignments from my early years at Pinnacle. There's some language in those agreements that I want to understand better. What kind of language? Language about conditions and terms related to my employment. Specifically, what happens to patent assignments if my role or employment status changes? There was a long pause. Connor, I think we need to meet in person to discuss this. Her office was in downtown Chicago, and her expression was serious as she pulled out files from my early patent applications. I remember these cases, she said, spreading out documents on her conference table. You were one of the first inventors I worked with when I joined Pinnacle's legal team. The assignment agreements we used back then were based on templates from my previous firm, and they contained some unusual provisions. What kind of provisions? Provisions that made patent assignments conditional on continued employment in a technical leadership role. The idea was to protect inventors from situations where they might be pushed out of companies after creating valuable intellectual property. I felt my pulse quicken. What does that mean exactly? It means that if your employment is terminated for reasons other than cause, or if you're demoted from a technical leadership position, you have the right to revoke the patent assignments and reclaim ownership of the intellectual property. The implications hit me immediately. How many of my patents have those provisions? Patricia began reviewing the files systematically. Let me check each application. 45 minutes later, she looked up with an expression I'd never seen before. Connor, 23 of your patents contain the conditional assignment language. These include the core technologies for the adaptive flow system, the predictive maintenance algorithms, the smart sorting mechanisms, and most of the software architectures that run Pinnacle's current product line. What percentage of Pinnacle's revenue comes from those technologies? She pulled out her laptop and began searching through Pinnacle's public financial filings. Based on their most recent annual report, I'd estimate that products incorporating your patented technologies account for approximately 65% of their total revenue. I sat back in my chair, trying to process what I just learned. Pinnacle had fired me from the company where I'd created the innovations that generated the majority of their income. And in doing so, they had triggered legal provisions that could give me back ownership of those innovations. What are my options? I asked. Several. You could revoke the patent assignments and demand licensing fees for Pinnacle's continued use of your technologies. You could sell or license the patents to Pinnacle's competitors. You could use the leverage to negotiate better terms for your departure. Or you could simply let them know about the situation and see how they respond. The choice was clear. After 20 years of building their success, Pinnacle had discarded me as excess overhead. Now, they were about to learn the true value of what they'd thrown away. I decided to give them one opportunity to address the situation professionally before exercising my legal rights. The next morning, I called Gordon Hayes and requested a meeting to discuss some aspects of my severance agreement. Connor, I hope you're ready to move forward with the transition, he said as I sat down in his office. We're eager to finalize the paperwork and help you start the next chapter of your career. Actually, Gordon, I've discovered some issues with the intellectual property situation that we need to address before I can accept the severance offer. His confident expression shifted slightly. What kind of issues? Issues related to patent ownership and assignment agreements. Specifically, the conditional provisions in the agreements that govern my early patents. I could see him trying to remember details about patent assignments from nearly 20 years ago. I'm not sure I understand what you're referring to. I'm referring to the fact that 23 of my core patents contain provisions that make the assignments conditional on my continued employment in a technical leadership role. When you terminate my employment, those provisions are triggered, and I regain ownership of the patents. Gordon's face went pale. That's impossible. All employee inventions belong to the company. Under normal circumstances, yes. But the assignment agreements I signed in the early 2000s contained protective language that our legal department apparently forgot about over the years. I slid a folder across his desk containing Patricia's analysis of the patent situation. This document outlines which patents are affected and estimates that products incorporating those technologies generate approximately 65% of Pinnacle's annual revenue. Gordon opened the folder and began reading. I watched his expression change from confusion to alarm to something approaching panic. "This can't be legally enforceable," he said finally. "I assure you it is. I've had the agreements reviewed by patent attorneys, and they confirm that the conditional assignment provisions are valid and enforceable." "What exactly are you proposing?" "I'm proposing that we renegotiate my departure terms to reflect the actual value I've created for this company over the past 20 years." The negotiations took 6 weeks. During that time, Pinnacle's legal team desperately searched for ways to challenge the patent situation, but their analysis confirmed what Patricia had already told me. The conditional assignment provisions were clearly written and legally binding. Meanwhile, I began receiving inquiries from Pinnacle's competitors who had somehow learned about the patent situation. 3 major firms expressed interest in licensing my technologies, and 2 made preliminary offers to purchase the patents outright. The leverage was overwhelming. Pinnacle could continue using technologies that generated most of their revenue, but only if they reached an acceptable agreement with me. The final settlement exceeded my wildest expectations. Instead of 6 months severance, I received a lump sum payment of $12 million. Instead of losing access to my life's work, I retained ownership of the patents, with Pinnacle paying ongoing licensing fees for their continued use. Instead of being forced into retirement, I gained the freedom to license my technologies to other companies or develop new innovations independently. Most importantly, I received something that can't be measured in dollars: vindication. Recognition that my contributions had real value, and that 20 years of innovation couldn't be dismissed as excess overhead. Gordon Hayes resigned 3 months after our agreement was finalized. The board of directors wasn't pleased with how the patent situation had been handled, particularly the financial impact of the licensing fees they now had to pay me. Pinnacle's stock price dropped 15% when they disclosed the new licensing obligations in their quarterly earnings report. Investors weren't happy to learn that the company's most valuable technologies were owned by a former employee who had been fired for being inefficient. 6 months after leaving Pinnacle, I started my own engineering consulting firm. My first client was one of Pinnacle's biggest competitors, who hired me to develop next-generation automation technologies that would leapfrog the systems I'd created 20 years earlier. The irony is perfect. The company that fired me for being unable to innovate is now paying me licensing fees while I help their competitors develop superior alternatives to the products I originally created for them. Today, my consulting firm employs 15 engineers and has contracts with 8 major manufacturing companies. We're developing the next generation of intelligent automation systems, and this time, I'm making sure that all intellectual property agreements properly reflect the value that innovative engineers bring to their organizations. The experience taught me that loyalty and dedication aren't always rewarded, but valuable skills and protected intellectual property can provide security that employment contracts never could. Sometimes the best revenge isn't getting even. It's demonstrating that the people who underestimated you made a mistake that will cost them far more than treating you fairly ever would have. Pinnacle Engineering Solutions is still in business, still using my technologies, and still paying me licensing fees every quarter. Every payment is a reminder that 20 years of innovation can't be dismissed as easily as they thought. And every time I develop a new breakthrough for one of their competitors, I remember that the most dangerous person to underestimate is an experienced engineer who knows the true value of what he's created.